Hi, this is Eli Kranzberg, and welcome to this series on Kazrog plugins. Now, these are really subtle and characterful plugins that are, in general, intended to emulate analog stages of processing. And I want to start the series off by looking at True Iron, which was developed to capture the real essence and warmth of outboard line input transformers, the very beginning of the analog stage. Now, it's a subtle plugin, and it's meant to be felt rather than really heard audibly. And in this first video, I just want to go through the parameters and how this all works, and then we'll hear it in action in the next video. Now, the idea with line transformers is that they're originally intended to provide isolation. Now, one of the benefits of that is that it adds low-level harmonics, what we often refer to as warmth. They add it to the original signal without introducing obvious harmonic distortion. But with True Iron, you can push it and get some nice creative saturation if you want. Now, the idea with True Iron is that it emulates a single component circuit that's intended to be clean in character, and we choose between the different circuits with this voicing knob. Now, this is great in front of other processing, so it's great as the first plugin on your channel strip, and it can mimic the input stage of analog equipment, and this is often overlooked, but it's important to sort of get the signal going into your other plugins off to a good start. And it also works on a stereo bus. It's great at the beginning of a mastering change, brings similar benefits, kind of like console emulation without the drawbacks and the noise. Now, creatively, we have this crush control, and this lets us drive the plugin into audible saturation and harmonic distortion. And we can use this ×2 button to double the amount of gain that's added. Now, I want to start by talking about the different models. We have the 108X, and it's got a warm sound, and it's what was used as the input transformer stage in the early LA2A limiters. Now, the 401B is based on German input transformers that were used in the U73B, and these transformers were also used a lot in mid-side mastering and in general mastering that was done in Europe in the 1950s to 80s, so it's great as a start for a mastering chain. Now, the V178 is what's used by products like Neumann, Telefunken, and Siemens, and all the Neumann mics use this as the input transformer. It's got a very subtle lower and upper mid-range push. Now, the 111C was originally used for radio and telephone transmission lines, but they were also used as the input transformer stage for high-end CD players. These are a good choice for mastering as well. Now, 1166A was used in the original Neve 1073 mic preamp EQs and 1272 mic channel preamp, so it's that Neve input transformer sound. And the 012 was the input transformer used in the Ure Revision A Blue Stripe 1176 compressor. So it's got a bit more of an aggressive character. As we all know, the 1176 has got an aggressive sound. And this is what's often associated with what we think of as older vintage type of input transformer sounds. So we have the crush control, we have unity and boost, and this sets the input impedance. And at unity, it's great for regular stereo material, but in boost mode, we get an extra 3 dB of gain, which is good for mono sources like guitars or bass drums or vocals. Now, the strength control adjusts the amount of non-linearity within the virtual transformer. So we can turn it up for more saturated sounds or down for more cleaner headroom. And at the default setting at 5, it is the proper harmonic response that matches the model that we choose over here. Now we have a morph control, and this interacts with the strength control, and at higher settings, it saturates the sound more with more even order harmonics. So it brings additional variation beyond the original modeled hardware unit. We might get a bit more total harmonic distortion, but it's great for enhancing the vibe of what the strength knob is doing. Now, DNA will tax the CPU a little bit more, but it gives a more accurate modeling of the original hardware, and we can disable it for compatibility with the older versions of True Iron, but it's basically an improvement in the modeling technology. We have a mix control, which is fairly self-explanatory. Then we have output gain over here, so you can use mix and output creatively to balance how much of the effect you want used. Now, up here, we have a preset browser, fairly self-explanatory, and a very simple save button with the floppy disk icon to save your own presets. You've got a file browser to save. And we can also store 2 different settings, and move back and forth for comparing, and we can go to the next and previous presets from there. Now here we get a different UI coloring. We can toggle between this or a green interface, strictly aesthetic. And then we have a bypass button over here. Now there's a couple of settings to be aware of. First of all, the online settings are what's used for real-time playback, and offline settings are when we're bouncing offline. And we have the amount of oversampling that we can choose here. So in general, we want higher oversampling for the offline processing. And you can see that as I raise this, we get more latency. So for real-time use, you want to leave it fairly low. We can enable or disable a DC filter, and we can toggle between linear phase and zero latency mode. And generally, we want zero latency for live, so we leave this disabled. And that basically disables the oversampling. You can see when I turn it on, the latency goes way up, especially with higher values here. So you basically want to leave that off for real-time use and then leave it on for when we're bouncing offline. And finally, you can have tooltips showing in the interface. So let's put this to work in the next video.